Hey everybody, welcome to the Purpose People podcast. Today I've got Neil Ward from Pennybont. Thanks so much for coming. Pennybont FC. How did you get into football out of all the things you could be involved with?
Well, sport's just been a huge part of my life since I was very, very young. My earliest memory is really about being outside playing sport, football particularly.
Yeah.
I grew up at a time where I guess street football still existed. I was fortunate enough to grow up in a village where we could roam around on bikes and it was a safe place to be.
Yeah.
We had local playing fields we could walk to, and we'd play football morning, noon, and night. We'd have 3-a-side, 4-a-side, 20-a-side, however many people turned up or how many balls we had.
Yeah.
The game being governed by the kids themselves, whoever had the ball or whoever was the oldest.
Yeah.
And we games that would go on all week, depending upon what the teams were and who was here, who wasn't, who had the ball, who didn't have the ball. And then from there, I guess I was lucky enough to be exposed to many different sports at different ages.
Yeah.
A wide range of experiences, which I, sort of build my skill level in different things. So I think being good at sport helped, and that was sort of my main focus in what I did through school, through club activities. And then looking really for a career in sport, I did a sports course. I looked for a sports course and wanted.
Was it like a sports degree college or?
It was a sports degree. Yes, yeah. One of the few. There weren't too many specialist sports courses other than teacher training.
No, that's right. Yeah.
And at the time, although I wanted to be a professional footballer, I sort of.
Where was your position? Where were you?
Mainly central defence, because I guess you got stereotyped, didn't you, as a young player, depending upon your size and your speed or your skill or whatever. So that's where I was playing and played grassroots football up to the age of 16. But I grew into the specimen I am now and played rugby. Got introduced to rugby in secondary school. And found that I was relatively good at that, and then played at representative level, and was looking to sort of further that pathway of playing and studying at the same time, and then happened to find a course in Cardiff at what was South Morgan Institute, which is now Cardiff Met.
Yeah.
UWIC before that, and continues to have this rich history of producing outstanding sports people, not just at rugby but across a range of different sports. So that was, my sort of mindset was to go somewhere where I could continue to excel at my sport and study at the same time. And at that time, when I did graduate, there weren't the sort of plethora of roles in sport that there are now. Sport was still very much voluntary. Even the top positions within rugby, within the Welsh Rugby Union or the RFU, were honorary positions in effect. And they were all largely voluntary, so there wasn't this structure of sporting opportunities of working in sport. So I wanted to continue and decided to do a teaching course, did my postgraduate certificate in education, and then went to teach in Hertfordshire for 5 years.
Okay. What, PE teacher?
And a PE teacher, yeah. And did enjoy it for the 5 years, but I just felt that the emphasis sort of moved away from teaching to actually a lot of my time was spent on pastoral care and trying to get the best out of young people, particularly people in the form that I looked after.
Yeah.
And also the emphasis was pretty much around sports and teams being successful, and less emphasis or focus on actually how do you get more people enjoying physical activity and being active and building their skills.
Yeah.
And I just thought I'd done 5 years, and I just thought, I'm not sure I want to do this for the next 30 years.
Yeah.
And it goes back to that discussion we were having earlier about doing things you enjoy doing rather than doing things because you're conditioned to do them. We think it's the right thing to do. So and at the time, my wife and I had our first child, Megan. We're finding it difficult to live in the southeast of England with cost of living and everything at that time. And so we sort of stopped, packed in our jobs and rebuilt our lives in North Wales closer to her folks. and found some ways of sort of earning money through supply teaching and things like that. And then I got the opportunity to work for the Welsh Rugby Union in a development role, and the first sort of steps, positions of these sports development roles that began to be developing over the sort of early mid-90s, really, where local authorities and sports organisations were looking to put in these structures of sports development, looking at how you could structure sport differently and invest in it to build pathways, and looking to professionalise how sport was organised and delivered. And I did that for a couple of years, again, to the point at which I thought, actually, I although I'm enjoying the role, I'm still working at quite an operational level, and I wanted to do something about how do I impact sport, how do I develop it potentially strategically, because I'd done some work around development plans and how I get more young people into the game and how I develop them through the talent pathway, how do I educate coaches. And I thought, well, actually what I like to do is be part of the bigger picture of how I develop the sport as a whole, rather than just in isolation. And I then got a role with sports, what was then Sports Council for Wales, Sports Wales, which is the body funded by the Welsh Government, to develop sports. And I work with a range of different governing bodies, from table tennis to triathlon, and one of them was football, and work with them in terms of their structures, helping football at that time, and we're talking the late 1990s into the early 2000s, didn't have a plan. There was no real structure, and a lot of the governing bodies didn't. They sort of they just worked away at what they did and did what they always did.
It's difficult. I mean, I find, for me, I played a lot of amateur football growing up and right the way through, and eventually I retired, so to speak, and then started again with the view of trying to start a club, from scratch with its own training ground and all that sort of stuff. And I remember even from grassroots, a lot of the challenges we found was the infrastructure as you went down. These kids couldn't even play half the time because of the weather was so bad, that the pitches and the infrastructure was so bad that you'd stop playing at the end of October and wouldn't play again to February. And you had fixtures, but you just couldn't play because of the weather. That's right. And so, the only way, if you wanted to be any good and consistently play, is you had to go through the academy system, and there's only so many places available, like to keep playing. Like, so you would play on their Astro and that sort of stuff. And I found, like, it was as an amateur manager, it was just very hard. Like, every season you'll try and get all. I remember you'd like cancel games because the weather or whatever, and you're just like, how am I going to get all these games in? And then come the end of the season, you're playing twice a week. You're playing on a Tuesday and a Thursday and on a Saturday. And I remember one year we were going for the title, and I think it was like we had 8 games in, I think it was something stupid like 14 days. And we just literally said, we ain't playing. We can't physically do it. And I remember the team we played before we came out, and the opposition said, we knew you were done when you come out. You're all limping, you're all this. And we lost to a team 4-1 where we should never have lost, but we were just done. And I realized, even from that low level up, in terms of the pyramid system and the growth at grassroots, just huge challenges in terms of how do you find the next great players? Because, like you said, you used to play football on the streets, and then they would get picked up, and there's multiple opportunities to, trials and stuff like this. But it's just getting even harder to get a scout to come down and watch a player, because the game might be off, and all of a sudden you've just lost the opportunity for that young person to go and do some good things. So I think having an infrastructure and stuff, there's certainly growing up, it wasn't there. It was more about luck than anything else. And certainly within England, I'm not convinced it's still there, but it's certainly got better.
Yeah, and I think, some core ingredients to getting people engaged in sport and being physically active, a key part of that is places to play, isn't it? And
big time.
One of the things that sort of sports competes with is different opportunities. A range of different opportunities that people can do, one of which is doing nothing. you know,
Yeah.
or staying at home and playing computer games or whatever that is.
Yeah.
So in order to get people physically active, you need those doorstep opportunities, those opportunities that are local, where there's infrastructure where you can go and play. As I alluded to earlier, I was fortunate when I was younger. We had playing fields and would play
Well, that's
whatever
it.
the
Or
weather.
we used to play in the road, and then we had to
or in the road,
stop and wait for the
That's
car to
right.
go past, and then we'd just go back
Yeah.
on the road. You wouldn't do that now.
No, so yeah, a big part of what I then did when I transferred from what I was doing previously with the Sport Wales into the Football Association Wales was looking at the strategy, looking at how we get more young people involved in the game and developing, and a key part of that is infrastructure and investing in infrastructure, with artificial surfaces becoming a big component of that because they're durable, you can play on them. They're not the answer because they're expensive to replace, so you've got to have a grass pitch strategy as well as your artificial pitch strategy. And then it's about creating the right environment for kids to play. Of course, when I played, there were no adults involved. That meant that we perhaps didn't have coaching and relied on ourselves to develop each other and learning through the game, which is important, but we didn't have coaching. But of course, when you then introduce adults into the game, where even parents are coming, they're taking their children to the game, and then they get invested in it, and they bring their values, and it's all about competition, it's all about winning, rather than the kids just taking part and enjoying it. Those are the things you've got to factor into how we try to contain that a little bit. Obviously have a supportive environment, but let young people play. You need to get the coaching right. You need to make sure you've got inspiring coaches who create a culture of safety and a culture of learning and development as well.
And also the coaches learn it, being able to handle parents. So I think sometimes the biggest hindrance to games is the parents on the sideline screaming at their kids and coaching them. And I remember we went down to see Claire's mum and dad, and we went to the local pitches, and I started to see these other lines on the edge of the pitch. I went, what are those for? And I said, no, the parents have to stand behind these lines.
Behind the line, behind the team.
Because they would normally run on the pitch and start shouting at everybody. Oh my God.
And that's the change in culture from when I played to where our children, certainly my children, play. That difference in culture where it was led by us, developed by us, and we were learned playing against less people, better people, older people, bigger people. They're just constantly changing environment, whereas now you're relying on the skill of the coach and the leadership of the coach to change the environment of the game, where if players aren't developing, then they know how to change the game. And it's probably at a grassroots level, it's less about coaching, it's more about environment and about the activity and the activity running well, and devising activities where they learn through the game rather than telling them. There's got to be some instruction, obviously, particularly with creating that safe environment, but obviously about basic technique, but it should be about learning through the game. So for me, a bit of driving ambition, both now but in the past, has been, how do I take this game, this sport, this club forward from what it is now and develop the environment of it, develop the people in it so it becomes better. So we've got good infrastructure. The strategy that we developed in Wales and Welsh football, because when I first joined, Wales was something like 117th in the world. To a point at which
where are they now?
I think they're sort of 2030s. They're falling below. 2016 we got into the top 10 in the world, which was a huge achievement. So
good.
From that early 2000s into 2016, by having a plan, by working at the plan, by creating investment through the support we had through the government, through the Football Association Wales, through UEFA, we created a structure in which and a plan that everyone focused on delivering, building the team around it, keeping the focus, keeping alignment to the strategy, such that we built a good pathway for players. Wales doesn't have this, depth of talent because we're a small nation. In Wales, only 3 million people, only around 100,000 people actively playing, and we rely a lot on those players that have been identified and developed outside of Wales, or who have transferred from the Welsh environment into the English environment.
Yeah.
To come back in and play for Wales. But we created the environment, we created the structure, the infrastructure, and that's still an ongoing project where we hadn't qualified for a major tournament for 60 years to now the ambition has changed. It's, Wales will be extremely disappointed if we don't qualify for the next World Cup.
Exactly. Certainly as a nation that was known predominantly for rugby, and now, essentially football is a thing now. They've always had great players. I'm a Liverpool fan, so Ian Rush back in the day, Dean Saunders back in the day, and I always used to follow them as my second team. So on the BBC where we lived in Bristol, but you could always get the Welsh games. It's funny with the TVs, you could always pick up when you used to tune in. I'm showing my age now. You used to manage to get across the border, so I'd always watch the Welsh games live because you could.
HTV Wales or
yeah,
HTV
that's
or
it.
BBC,
They wouldn't be on. They wouldn't be on like the England games, but they might be on Sky or whatever. But the Welsh games were always on BBC. So when they used to play at Cardiff Arms Park and stuff, we used to follow them. I remember watching Germany. We beat Germany. Wales 1-0.
That's right, Rushie's goal.
Rushie's goal, and I was like loving it. It was such a cool time. It's interesting you talk about having that plan and having that infrastructure, because I spent some time about 2 years ago now. I went to Sacramento in California, and my friend's got 7 sons. 7 sons,
wow.
Yeah. From 21 to I think now the youngest is about
almost
7.
a team.
Yeah. and he's running like multiple teams. So he's got his youngest son, his second youngest son is in a team. I think it's like his third oldest son is in a team. So he runs 2. But what I was amazed about it is a culture. Like, it almost reminds me of the way it used to be, where all the families are involved. They're all on the sideline. I mean, obviously they got the weather, right? So you've got literally the kids are playing the game, but literally all the way down the touchline are chairs. Like, they should all sat there watching the game. And they're involved, and there's the respect aspect of things. And I went and saw the youngest one that had just started out, and they could barely walk, and they're all playing. Like, literally the whole field is just covered with all got the kits on, and you're watching them like fall over and whatever. But it was just a real culture for outdoor life, get out there, families enjoyed, and making sure that the kids have a great Saturday. And I thought, and still, I think that's the downside with obviously the UK, is that we don't have the weather to encourage that. And then we're down to the facilities, and then there's only so many facilities, and then it's money. It's like, well, if you're going to pay for an AstroTurf pitch, now everyone's got to pay money to hire the thing. So it gets very expensive, whereas at least out there. And so I look at that infrastructure where they've got clubs that are going from sort of like 4 years right up to sort of like under 19s as a whole club. Apps, infrastructure, is all there, So I look at America. I know it's a massive country, but for me, I reckon they'll win something in the next 20 years, 25 years, because they got that such dearth of player, and the adoption out there is huge, and the culture, certainly within California anyway, is get outside and play sport.
Yeah, I think certainly everything's bigger in the States, isn't it? So their clubs are much bigger entities. We're talking thousands of players, aren't we? And they've got a huge revenue streams, and they've got their own infrastructure. I think part of the challenge that we have in the UK is that most clubs don't have their own infrastructure. So they're transient. They go around different places trying to find places to play. So they're not built around infrastructure in the way, say rugby is predominantly where they have one base, and they play out of there and from seniors to juniors, albeit that can be problematic now because of the quality of the pitches. But football is less so. There's not, other than the top clubs, there isn't really infrastructure. So at grassroots level, everyone just tries to find somewhere to play.
Yeah.
So only time you really get together is the end of the season when you have your awards.
That's right.
So there's less of that club environment, and so they become clubs within clubs.
Yes.
And then you're very much dependent, and then it's difficult to improve and develop that because everyone's in different. It's fractured.
Yeah, they're all in different silos, aren't they?
You depend upon the culture and the values of the people that are leading the teams.
Yeah.
And this is the key thing. It's about not having just anyone to run activities. It's about having the right people, the right values, the right skills, who are there principally to help young people fall in love with sport and physical activity, and if it's not that activity, it's something else that they do, or introduce them a range of activities rather than just being in one. That's
And I think
that's
that's
what's
the
key.
and I think that's the thing is that I mean, it's almost like you thought the getting out and doing physical activity is a massive challenge, but then there's that aspect of doing physical activity versus you're going to be a Premier League footballer. Where you see the parents put them under immense pressure and then they're a failure if they don't make it. And I think what I saw out in the States, for example, there was none of that pressure because they just didn't need to be. It's a big country. They get out there. It's health and well-being. I know it's very documented that Americans eat lots and overweight or whatever, but certainly for what I saw in terms of the generations coming through, there's a big emphasis on no matter what you're doing, you're not sitting in front of that TV and that thing. You're just going to go and play with your mates. And in the same way where the truism of us getting the ball, running out, going to the street and playing football, it almost felt a little bit like that. Although it was organised, it felt like you got a ball, you got a pair of boots, go out and enjoy it. And I think for me, it's like I find with young people, I still think there's that element of, particularly because of the Premier League, it's like, well, am I going to make it or not? No, I'm not, so I won't do it. Rather than let's go and enjoy all the other aspects of being part of a team, learning life skills and all that sort of stuff. So, I think there's still that element within football. I think rugby is a lot more relaxed, whereas rugby is like, no matter what size, shape you are, let's go and have fun. I think I grew up in football and I found it quite a toxic environment growing up and playing in it. Whereas when my son started playing rugby, it was like, well, this is different. Like the culture was very, very different. And I was like, this is more, the culture in rugby seemed to be more inclusive than soccer. Whereas soccer was like, well, who's the elite? Who's the top 5 people? We're only interested in them. And then we'll build around them because win at all costs. Whereas I felt rugby was more about, we'll take part.
Yeah, I've seen both. I was involved in rugby with my sons as well. And I saw elements of what I saw in football as well.
Yeah, okay.
I think the values in rugby have been traditional, but they're changing because it's professionalised as a sport, and it is becoming a professional sport.
Do you think that's because? Do you think that's because you've got a smaller pool to pick from? Maybe in terms of Welsh rugby, if it was Welsh rugby.
Yeah, I think there's a strong emphasis through the schools of, filtering players out very early,
right,
and only focusing on a small group of players who are good.
Yeah,
I think that's the problem rugby as it filters players out far too soon, makes decisions on players, whether that be a schoolboy level or into the performance pathway at regional level. And so they lose players who get disappointed, disaffected.
Yeah.
And then there's also a cohort of players that don't get the opportunity to play, who like to play, so your base diminishes. Whereas before, rugby was built around the traditional schools, and you'd have teachers, whether you're a sports teacher or not, you would run a team, and you'd have a plethora of teams at different age groups, and so you had a wide base. And then if they couldn't make the school team, they were going to play in a club team. That's where club teams came from. Same in football, really. Kids couldn't make the school team, so they go and play somewhere else, and clubs formed, didn't they?
Yeah.
But I think there's no I'm not saying that I know the answers to either football or rugby. I think, but there is something around. You're right, creating the right environment where young kids, boys or girls, get the opportunity to play, to experience it, to enjoy it, and being physically active, and there being not so much pressure or emphasis on competition and progression. At the end of the day, if a player's talented, they'll find their way, and people will see them and identify them. But even then, even in the best academies, less than 1% are going to go on and get a professional contract. Because not only are you competing against, if you're in a pro academy in England or Wales or Scotland, you're not just competing against your cohort of players within the country, you're competing internationally as well, and the best talent in the world, because those clubs are looking to recruit and develop.
They want the best 11. They don't care where they're
from. They want the best players in. And then obviously you've then got to try and find your way from an academy position into playing, professional, and being less focused around development and more about winning. And then it's about that transition then of how you find your way into the first team, wherever that is, and where you get the opportunity to play regularly.
But I think the thing that's changed for me maybe, and you certainly when you're talking about developing sport, is I don't think when I was playing as a kid, the only pathway into sport as a career was you make it as a player. Whereas I think now we're starting to see there are a million other roles that you can actually do within sports. And I think that's the big thing that's changed for me if I look at it now. If I was 16, 17, 18 now, being as fanatical about sports as I was, if someone said to me, well, you might not make it, but you could do this, or you could be a coach, or you could do, and I did get my coaching badges and run teams or whatever, but I thought that was it. I thought that was the only pathway. It was coaching kids, and I didn't want to do that forever. And I thought, oh, I'll focus on my brand building and marketing and that sort of stuff. But I think nowadays, I think people are more aware that there is a bit more of a career to sport. You could be an agent, for example, or you could be building, a brand. You could be a brand ambassador and take a club global. So I think it's definitely improved from that perspective, that there are careers in sport that weren't when I was growing up.
Yeah, sport is a business, isn't it? So the same opportunities exist as they do in business. Whether that's social media, whether that's marketing, commercials, sales. Obviously, then you've got the traditional coaching. You've got sports science, the medical team around that. There's all those roles that exist that didn't exist when I first started out. As I said earlier, it was very much voluntary. And also, if you look at who's leading sports now, whether it's in clubs or in national governing bodies, they tend to be people who've come from business. Because it's not just about, I've come up this traditional sport route and probably didn't have that, and I've had to sort of learn those business skills in that environment. But a lot of people now who are in that club or national governing environment have come from business, so they've been able to bring their business acumen and what they've learned in business back into the sport, because in order for sports to continue to thrive and grow, they need to develop, and they need to be commercial, be commercially minded. So that the world of sport has changed tremendously in the time that I've been working in it, and you see the plethora of roles that exist within the structure. So if you're not, that's an important point that you make, that if you fall in love with the game, whether it's football or whatever sport, and you don't quite make it as a player, or you just find your level, which is fine, you can still stay involved. There are other ways that you can stay involved in sport or in your chosen sport and still have that opportunity to work within it. I think that's important.
Yeah, it's a big one. I mean, it's more like, well, what's the point of me being a coach if I can't be a footballer, like a pro footballer, which is a complete nonsense. There are people that are incredible footballers, incredible football managers, but not necessarily great players by any stretch of the imagination. So how did you go from like working high level then, in terms of infrastructure development and stuff like that, to end up doing what you're doing now? What was the switch?
Well, the sort of next piece in the sort of career journey was I worked in Morocco for 4 years with the Royal Moroccan Football Federation. It was an opportunity that came. I
better weather, I guess.
Certainly, the technical director I worked with at the time within the Welsh FA, he gained a position as technical director in Morocco. They asked me to go, will you come with me? We worked together a long time. It's going to be a challenging environment. It's a new chapter. It's a new opportunity for you as well. And I just thought, well, I'd served by that time 12 years in the role I had within the FAW, managing a group of companies, within the FAW, one of which being the charitable arm, the FAW Trust, which focused on the work I was describing earlier.
Yeah.
Took that opportunity and spent 4 really interesting years out in Morocco, and then came back sort of 2000, well, last year, 24, took some time out, thought about what I wanted to do. I'd been disconnected from my family and friends for 4 years. Opportunities came up elsewhere.
Yeah.
And I just thought, do I want to be living abroad again? Do I want to be traveling? My family, my mother's that much older. And I just thought, shall I find something closer to home? What's out there? And then I had this opportunity, came up and saw the opportunity with Penabont, and it just felt like me a bit of a passion project. It's a semi-professional club playing in the Cymru Premier League. It had a bit of a reset as a club, decided that in order to get to the next level in its development, it needed a proper plan. It needed someone to deliver that plan. So I chucked my hat in the ring, got the role, and I just thought, it's a good opportunity. I worked in obviously a governing body context, whether it be Wales or in Morocco, working on the big structural side of things.
This is more local, isn't it?
And then it's more about, okay, so what can I do in a club context? What can I do with this? And about not just building the team on the pitch or teams, because we run a women's team, we run women's teams and academies. So obviously clearly need to make the men's first team successful on the pitch, because that drives the economy of the club. But actually I'm also equally as interested in how we can make an impact in the community of the club. How can we be, sport has a great way of hooking people in who, and it's not just about physical activity, it's about a range of different skills that you can develop, a sense of belonging, sense of community, for example.
Yeah.
And how can we use the club and the infrastructure of the club to connect with the 10,000 homes that are around us and the wider conurbation of Bridgend and South Wales to really make a difference to people, whether that's being physically active through playing football or following, being a supporter, or getting involved as a volunteer. And adding to the life of the club. Or I'm really interested in how sport can deliver other things, in terms of, alternative curriculum. So young people who are looking to build, who perhaps disaffected in school, but through packages like Learning for Success, like the PFA organise, how can you use numeracy, literacy, and sport to build skills in young people who perhaps disaffected in more traditional ways of learning, forming partnership with local college and giving the opportunity for students to come into the club and develop work-based skills and learning and understanding. So they get the theory in college, but then they get the practical through the college, through the work in the club, and get their CV moments that help them apply their knowledge and understanding for what they do next. Whether that's decide they want to continue, or actually say, no, this is not what I want to do, which is important as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because my so one of my mates growing up, his uncle was Sam Allardyce, and it still is, obviously, and he was manager of Bolton, and so we followed his career when he was at Notts County and then Blackpool, and I think it was Blackpool first, then Notts County, and then he ended up at Bolton. And I remember going to a semi-final playoff game, and the football pitch that they had, the pitch was so bad, like it looked like the worst pitch you'd ever seen, and they had to play on it, and they lost 2-1 over the two legs. And the issue, and we were like, well, why is the pitch in such a bad state? I said, we didn't have any money, so they'd spent all the money on the they moved the stadium out, put it, like, the best way I could describe it is very similar to how Cardiff City is, actually. Sort of like there's a stadium surrounded by a car park and then loads of like shops, but it was out of town, and it obviously started to get more successful as he was more involved in it, and it started going up. But what struck me was that when clubs moved out from their sort of like community, so to speak, it lost something of identity. And I think one thing I love about when you look back at the clubs that were formed, 100 years ago, whatever, like certainly like Liverpool, they've stayed in that community area, and it's like a community club. And I think, when you're building grassroots and when you're building something small, the community is everything. And to move it out into a super stadium on the side doesn't always work. We know like MK Dons, for example, so it doesn't always work. And I think for me, the success of a club is a community that it supports, and it's like a two-way conversation. It's like, how are the club giving back? Are they giving kids the opportunity within the schools to come and train on the pitch? And where the kids might never have trained on a pitch. They might have been playing on like a playground for forever, and one day a year that school then gets the opportunity to go and play on the pitch. The aspects of the local players being more present, like in the local community, in the schools, and doing a talk and stuff like that. And as you got players going up in the pyramid, you got people coming back down in the pyramid, and how can they give back? You know, like for instance in Bristol, there's a team called Yate just down the road, Yate Town, and a few of the ex-Rovers players ended up coming back down and then playing for there. So there's, I think for me, there's that aspect of, there's the super commercial, let's get loads of free car parking and stick it in a place. But I think somehow the club loses that DNA. And I think for me, you know, the longer a club can keep that community aspect of thing, I think that's the stronger they'll be. And I think that's what maybe Wrexham have got right, you know, and that's why they've grown so much, is that, yes, they got the TV show, yes, they got Hollywood actors or whatever, but it's a big emphasis on how do we make the community win rather than, you know, just the club win, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think more and more people are sort of coming back into the non-league game because it's authentic, isn't it? It's much more authentic than, you know, the Premier League is now stratospheric. The players
you can't even you can't get there, can you? You can't watch a game.
It's you're right. It's challenging to get tickets. We're paying a lot of money, so it's the, you know, people are perhaps being a little bit excluded from that regular, where the grounds you were talking about earlier, like Liverpool or Everton or other clubs based in the community, you know, the city or the town would be taken up with what was going on, and they get in the match day in the local pub and then walk up into the stadium, where obviously if you're out of town, then you don't, it's not quite the same, is it? So
it's the revenue though, isn't it? It's like the local community are benefiting from the revenue as well of those fans. Right. You know, you pull that out and you stick them over here. It's like, well, you got faceless national brands, you know, like, I don't know, you got like View Cinema, or you got Nando's or whatever, but they're national chains, you know, which are built in that infrastructure. Whereas, you know, Bill, who runs the Farmer's Arms or whatever it's called, he's got a load of people coming into his pub before and after the game, which, you know, he might not need to work for the rest of the week because he's done well at the weekend, you know. Yeah. So I think for me, it's that community aspect, and I think the guy that I know, is it Dulwich? I think it is Dulwich. That was sold to a club to keep it sustainable, and what happened is the new owners wanted to sell it off for a supermarket, and they got wind of it, and he rallied the troops, and the fans bought the club back off the owners, and it's essentially a hipster team. He said occasionally a football match breaks out while they're all drinking wine and posh pies, you know. And for me, that's great. You know, do they want to win? Of course they do, but they recognise that it's a community club.
And I think the communities now recognise they're losing their local pubs, they're losing their post office, aren't they? So they're becoming much more conscious of, actually, this is a real asset for the community,
big time.
Particularly the local football club, because it's where people go, where people socialise, where people gather, even if it's once a week or every other week, and they catch up with people. And you know, the stories of the local community are told and what's going on, but also where people go and they take part. And your local community club as well. It's not just about playing the sport. It could be socialising. It could be going to events. Could be birthday parties, or it could be, you know, there are community events going on that everyone's involved in, or there's classrooms where courses are taught, or, you know, so there's lots of things that the club can offer the local community, which
100%,
which keeps the community cohesive, keeps them together, and people don't want that to be lost. So I suppose my motivation is how do we enhance that.
Yeah.
How do we make it better? How do we improve the infrastructure of the club? How do we create investment in the team so they progress? Because the real advantage for the current Premier League is that we have that pathway to Europe. Only clubs in the Premier League in England, you know, have that pathway, really.
Yeah.
So we get the opportunity to play in Europe, as we did last season. We played a team from Lithuania. So
nice.
Putting Bridgend, you know, the town of the Bridgend, on the international map. At the same time, and representing.
Did you get many travel?
Internationally?
Did many travel?
We had 50 to 100 people go, which was
that's
which
amazing.
Was great for, great for our level. And of course, there are people going to somewhere they would never
Yeah,
been before.
exactly.
Lithuania wouldn't be on the trip. And the same for, Wales away has a huge following, and people
Yeah, they do.
will use that more for their rather than go to Spain for the holiday, they'll follow the team, and they're going to Armenia, Azerbaijan, Liechtenstein, places where they wouldn't normally travel, and seeing the world through football, which is brilliant. Again, another example of what football and sport can deliver.
So we work with a company that are the official travel partner for the Welsh FA, and exactly that. He started it as a hobby, and it just something. Oh, can you just organise this for me? And it's just turned into a business. And he's looking after the Scottish FA. It's the official travel partner for them, and the Welsh now. And obviously the Scottish have qualified already. So he's hoping that Wales make it and qualify as well. But again, he's involved in the game, but in a different way. And
sport and business collaborating.
Yeah,
together, isn't
it's
it?
so good. And he said, I love watching Wales. It's like it's the perfect job for him. And I think for me, when I look at the grassroots football and I look at the sort of the non-league game, I do think you're right. A lot of people are going back to that game because it is more accessible. And I think the biggest thing, even in the Premier League this year, we've only got one game on Boxing Day. One game, which was, I remember going, because my mate was a massive Tottenham fan, and going in the car to watch the game at White Hart Lane. The football was terrible, but but we'd go and watch the game. And I remember Tottenham playing Norwich, and then the next day they played back to back, like the day after, literally the next day, and they played Norwich, and they played Everton at home, and but just that whole. It felt like you were part of a community, and it was the tradition of Boxing Day. It's like, yeah, we have Christmas together. We're all going to watch the game and travel down. Whereas even that's being removed from the Premier League.
Well, that's where you've got the advent of TV and TV controlling, the how sport is structured and run.
Yeah.
It's certainly in terms of timing, kickoff times, isn't it? So, yeah, that is a common thing, isn't it? And then it becomes difficult. If you're the Premier League, I guess you've got a project that sells itself, and people want it, but even at our level, if you change, or the thing we find, we've been experimenting on a Friday evening, which has worked and worked really well.
Okay.
Because we're not competing with Swansea and Cardiff, for example, on a Saturday, and people getting their football fix on a Friday, which leaves them free on a Saturday. But then if you start moving the kickoff times, then it midday, 5 o'clock, or you schedule, reschedule, it then becomes difficult to keep promoting it because we knew when we were back in the day when you're following the team, the kickoff time, if it's not this Saturday, it's the Saturday after.
Yeah.
And we knew there's a game on Boxing Day. You didn't have to go and look for it, did you? I wonder what time it is or what's on.
Yeah. They all
you
played
just knew it was standardised. Is that right or wrong? I think it's different. It's certainly different, and sometimes it's not really helpful. But it obviously it's dictated to by the commercial environment, and that's how football is funding itself now.
So with the Welsh League, obviously, and the pathway to Europe, where or how far can that league go? Do you think? Do you think it has the aptitude to become a really strong pathway for beds of talent for, to get into the sort of the pyramids of like the English game or the Scottish game? Do you think that? Obviously, if you look at, you've got Premier League, England, that pyramid, you've got the Scottish League or whatever. Some people are debating whether that's as good or as strong. Where do you think the Welsh League could go? Do you think it could eventually compete with Scotland, or eventually become a really good pathway for young people for?
Well, I certainly think it's got unfilled potential, definitely. And in the 4 years I was away and then came back and then checked in with it, you could see the advancement in the standards.
Yeah.
Because a lot of investment in coach education, all the coaches having pro licenses, the stadia and the infrastructure had improved. There's still a lot of work to do on that, but it improved. So the foundations are there. There is a glass ceiling, so there's no promotion effect into the Football League. The better clubs in Wales, or the bigger clubs, the Swansea, Wrexham, Cardiff, Newport, are playing in the English structure anyway. And that does affect us because our bigger clubs don't represent us in Wales, so our coefficient ranking for Europe is woeful, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And therefore then the investment doesn't come back in we don't get the level of investments, the return for non-participation monies that other countries would have. So that's difficult. So, our options are, one, we got to invest in ourselves and get ourselves better structured, better run, and to attract investment. And I think the other thing is external investment. So looking at, and which we're doing as a club, looking at where there are opportunities for people who are interested with the right motivations and the right values to come and invest in a club that will enable us to go from part-time to hybrid to full-time, and then also go into full-time. So if you take the best team in the league at the moment is a team called TNS, who are based in Oswestry, and they've had a backer for a number of years, but they're in a position where through their European performances, they now start and become a little more self-sustainable and not reliant on a major shareholder. So they got into the group stages of the Conference League, so they're paying the likes of Sparta Prague and Fiorentina. And then they're coming back with significant revenue from that experience, which they can then reinvest in their squad and then reinvest in their infrastructure. So that's what we ourselves are trying to replicate. Which means, then you can, you improve your infrastructure, you improve your own pitch product. More people are coming to watch. You're raising your standards both domestically and then hopefully internationally, which then drives revenue. So you've got to get into that virtuous cycle of success, and European qualification for us is that, because the sums are significant. However hard we continue to work hard on improving tendencies and attracting sponsorship. Once you get into Europe and even the qualifying rounds, you're talking 400,000 euros, and that incrementing each round until you get into the group stages. That's a significant sum of money that you can then operate off, isn't it?
Yeah, because I think a lot of the non-league clubs that were surviving off FA Cup draws, that's it. Whereas like you've got the added bonus of a European game, which obviously there's more money in it than that. So I think for me, it's I think the UK will benefit from having a strong Welsh league as well as a strong Scottish league, and I think we are still seeing emerging talent, if you like, Welsh talent or Scottish talent getting into the Premier League. But I think Liverpool, my team, I mean, this season I think was the first time in I don't know how many years the entire team was foreign. That there wasn't a single player.
The backbone of the era that we were talking about earlier. You had your Welsh players like Rushy, you had your Scottish players like McMahon, and your Irish players like Whelan. They were built off a British, a structure of British talent, where that's changed completely now, isn't it?
Yeah, and we're a lot of going to the history of it, because I think we shot ourselves in the foot, and I don't think we stood up hard enough to either UEFA or FIFA. Was that when Graham Souness took over at Liverpool, they changed the rules on the standing of a British player. They called him foreign. So what that meant was that Graham Souness couldn't field that team that was successful, because he could only have 4 non-foreign players on the pitch at one time. So effectively, they had to disperse the talent. So Manchester United at the time had the class of '92 coming through, and we know that story and whatever else. And I guess you could argue that Liverpool wouldn't have discovered McManaman or Robbie Fowler or people like that had they not been forced to do it. But by them being classed as foreign, I think then really affected the game long term. And I think it was a case of, if you're now foreign, now you're competing with the foreigners. So if a Scottish player was playing in the English league, he was now foreign. And a Welsh player playing in the English league was now foreign. So now that caused problems. So now you had this big influx of foreign players, because actually they're not got the opportunity like they once had, because you'd have a couple of foreign players come in and then 8 or 9 of the team would be from the British Isles, and then all of a sudden now that couldn't happen because they were competing. And I think that's how the game's become like it has, where now we're fielding teams, local heroes, and it's very rare that you'll get a Scouser in the Liverpool team. Yes, I had Trent Alexander, and now we've got Jones, who seems to be picking up. So it's like, but it's very rare. And I think that for me is like, someone should have stood up then and said no. But the flip side of that is that, you've got different leagues, and that then compete as Great Britain. And I think that's the challenge there. But I think for me,
that has been the challenge politically.
Yeah.
So if for Wales to maintain its own identity, it has to run a national team. It has to run a national league.
Yeah.
And so that's quite clear. So
So I think for me, it's like, so for me, that long term is why the Premier League is like it is. I think, I always feel a I just think that DNA's in me when I'm watching a team. I like to see the grit of the Scottish guys. Graham Souness is one of my favourite players. I've had the fortune to have a couple of chats with him this year. I've met him a couple of times. Unbelievable man in terms of what he's doing. But for me, it was. I think we're healthier as a team, as a squad, and the brand of football. I think it's. Yes, you coach, and we've got different ways of coaching and that and whatever. But I think the pathways are just almost so locked to. If you've got a name with a Z on the end, you're going to get preference over someone that's got Jones, and I think that's sad.
I think it's just this market forces, isn't it? And what's interesting now is you're seeing the top, particularly English talent, now going. I mean, I said this 10 years ago. If I was a top English talent, I'd be looking to go and play in Belgium or France to get my first experience, because you're not going to get it. You have to be someone who's truly outstanding, or I'll get a lucky break to force your way into the team and then sustain it.
Well, it's Germany as well, isn't it? A lot
Germany,
a lot of young guys have done well in Germany, and
one of the benefits of doing previous roles has been the opportunity to have study visits to other countries, to look at what they're doing, even countries like Austria, who had strong rules around domestic, having a number of domestic players, having a number of players under 23 in the squad, to ensure that they're building the pathway of talent within their own country rather than developing the talent of other countries. Making conscious decisions like that. Difficult to do that in the Premier League now, because they're now foreign owned. They're now in international conglomerates in effect, aren't they?
Well, this is it. But it's like, but that I think has that negative effect when you go to the national game. Then you got players playing in the national team that aren't playing in the Premier League. They're on the bench, and yet they're in the England team. And if England are supposedly one of the top teams in the world, and then half the team aren't even playing in the Premier League, they're just coming off the bench. For me, that's something wrong with the system.
That's the case for Wales. That the number of Premier League players has reduced, and of those, not everyone. There will be periods where not everyone's playing.
No.
And therefore that then becomes more difficult to then build your team or pick a team that's playing regularly, because you need to be playing regularly in order to to do well at an international level, because it's a challenging environment. So if you're constantly just training and not playing, then it becomes more difficult, doesn't it?
Yeah. So where do what's the dream? Where can this go? What would you say? Job well done. What would the?
Yeah, I think for me, my personal journey is one I've done things I wanted to do and enjoyed doing and kept doing, and if I stopped enjoying it, then I made a change. And I keep reinforcing that to my kids. I don't advise them too much or tell them. I just say, well, this is my attitude was, did something I enjoyed doing, tried to do as well as I could, and if I didn't enjoy it, then look to try and make a change, which is in today's environment is a brave thing to do. I think sometimes
100%.
You just say, even I look back when I finished teaching, went stop. Restart somewhere else. We had a young family, we had a house, so we had a mortgage at the time. We just said, no, it's just not working for us. We're going to do something different. We're going to start again. So from that point of view, I continue to do something fulfilling. I think this is a great project, great opportunity to build a club, to attract investment in the infrastructure. So we've got plans to develop. We're looking at £4 or £5 million worth of infrastructure development to rebuild the stadium, to build a second pitch and other recreational pitches as well for the community to benefit from. Looking to attract investment into the team and the first team men, and get win the Premier League, which we haven't done. Our best position is second, which was last season. We're not doing as well as that this year, unfortunately. Regular qualification for Europe. Our women's team, they're presently in the second tier in the Ardell Southern League. Progress them up into the Premier League as well, so they're playing against Wrexham and Cardiff City, and then build that pathway for local talent. ensure that we have that role in anyone who's local and aspires to become a better player, that we invest in them and develop them. Hopefully that will mean they'll progress into the first team. If not, then they're playing somewhere else at their best level.
Yeah.
And then that community offer as well, in terms of participation, recreational activity. We just set up a women's vets team. We've got 4 or 5 men's vets teams, so players from sort of 45 up to 75.
Wow, okay. Yeah.
Again, and I know that just a case example where you got guys who've retired, who they perhaps could be widowers, but they getting this sense of community a couple of times a week, training or playing. They're coming together. They have breakfast together after the training and have a little bit of a chat. That's something that's real value to them, isn't it? In terms of not just the game, but the environment that's providing.
It's interesting you say that, because that is one thing I do miss. You're not playing now. I played, I managed, I had a team, so I played, managed, and then managed, and just that changing room and that 12, 15 players in the room, and that you can't reproduce that elsewhere. Do you know what I mean? It's quite a strange one. So every now and again, you'll connect and you talk, and then you talk about the good old days and that sort of stuff. So I think being able to connect much later on when you're a veteran, it is time, right? As you get older, you got more responsibility, so I get that. And certainly when you were younger, you maybe didn't have so many, so you could do it. But I think for me, it is end to end. It's an end-to-end journey. It's like, how do you affect from young children right the way through to the older generation and keep the club alive? Because if you don't have that, people's interests, as you said, there's so many other things to be distracted with. But I think sport is a massive thing, and it's really important for every community. And if there is a club, and I think you see that around the world as well. Like if you go to various different cities or whatever, there's always a football club. I remember me and Claire, we took our youngest to Turkey, and they booked the hotel, and I think the person that booked it knew I was into football, and we opened up the curtains, and it was a place called Alanya in Turkey, and the hotel room was looking onto the training pitch, and they were doing pre-season. So I just sat outside and watched them do pre-season. I was like, this is brilliant. But again, there was a community, and all the hotels are all involved in it, and I just thought, it doesn't matter where I go, football is a common language. We went to Sicily, and the only way I could communicate with the Italian guys was through football clubs, and we ended up playing football together. And I think we won the local tournament. But again, I had an amazing time. How football was this common language, but again, it was always about the people that surround the club rather than just the club itself. So, how would people come and watch you? How's it? Just go online, book.
Yeah, go online. We use an app called Fanbase where they can get their tickets, obviously through the website, which we need to evolve and keep developing in. And that's part of the challenge really. Is I have a very small number of paid staff, so we're reliant on an army of volunteers, which has been really different for me from working in an organisation with 100 people to having 3 or 4 people, but then trying to attract as many different people in as possible. But that's been a great experience as well, because I've brought in people I probably wouldn't have connected with previously, who involved because they see the opportunity to get involved in football, or they're younger people and think, actually, if I develop those skills, I could transfer from what I'm doing now, which I'm not really enjoying that much, into football. The challenge is, of course, that you're reliant on them when they can do it, not when you want it to be done. So we're continuing to evolve in that, trying to make it better. But as the resources allow, we'll put more paid people in, which allows us to accelerate progress. So everyone's welcome to come down. Boxing Day.
Well, we're gonna have to come down.
Boxing Day we're playing Britain Ferry, which is a bit of a local derby.
Oh, nice.
2:30 kickoff. So if anyone wants to come, then please come along.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I've really enjoyed the chat and the kind of the community, and literally from a bigger perspective, building the club rather than just a team. And it's been really cool that you can, if you really like something, you can find a career in it, and obviously you're testament to that. So Thank you for taking the time.
I've enjoyed it. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much for being part of the Purpose People podcast. You're listening to us on a regular basis helps us get the message out there that living life on purpose is the best possible life to live. How can you help us? Well, you can like and subscribe to us on YouTube, but you can also follow our podcast channels, which are on Apple, Amazon, and Spotify. Please keep supporting us. Please keep liking and sharing us. Please keep following us on social media. And you know what? We're inspiring more and more people to live life on their terms.